Hello everyone. This is Think Up, and today we're going to talk about whether everything we know about addiction is wrong. And I wanted to speak about this because of the Johann Hari video, which I liked it because it was super clear, and the examples that he was using were quite straightforward. The rat in the cage examples and the difference between the addictive behavior, or rather the non-addictive behavior, based on the context and the community that the rats were in. For those of you who didn't see that video, I'm going to link to it here anyway. So on thinkup.tv. If you're watching this somewhere else, if you go to thinkup.tv, and you'll see that there's a link to that video. But today I'm joined by a very old friend of mine called, well, he's not very old, but I've known him for a long time, called Tim Love. And this, I think you and I met when you came to work with me in my music shop, I think.
Yeah, that was 99?
Yeah, so that's 20 years ago?
20 years. Man.
Oh dear.
Okay. I think, you'd opened the shop maybe 2 years previous.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's ages. Okay, right. So that suddenly made me feel extremely old, but I still feel as if I'm about 22 anyway. But Tim, thanks for joining.
You're welcome.
When you saw that video, when you saw my post, why did you think that this was something that you wanted to get involved with?
Well, I was kind of an active addict, alcoholic, for, depending on how you want to define it, I'll probably say for the last 10 years.
Okay.
Sort of going through various different stages of how my life was being affected by it. I've been sober for nearly 4 years, and it's just something that's very now it's very close to my heart and to my family's heart, and I think it's a good conversation to have, because there's still you still see it regularly that punishment for addicts is jail time, sanctions, rather than help, which is what they initially need. And then there just needs to be a new conversation around how addicts are treated and perceived in the public space.
I agree, and so on the NHS website, bless them, there's a stat from a charity called Action on Addiction that says that 1 in 3 people are addicted to something.
Right.
1 in 3, and they then go on to list that there's gambling, drugs, alcohol, nicotine, but also there can be work, internet, solvents, shopping, sex. Yeah. So are we? Which part of the conversation needs to change? There's the how we help addicts, but is there also the definition of an addict, or is there, is it? I mean, I don't know where to start with this rabbit hole. Are we? Do we all agree that addiction is something that is out of our control, which is the kind of the primary definition online is that addiction is defined as not having control over doing, taking, or using something to the point where it could be harmful. That's the commonly accepted.
I would agree with that. I think there needs to be a small caveat that sort of states that if, when you realise that any kind of behaviour is, first of all, out of your control and is detrimental to your life, when you make an attempt to stop, you can't.
Okay.
So there are plenty of people out there that, for example, if we took alcohol, that drink too much, negative consequences just keep building up, and it could range from anything from relationship breakups, losing the driving license, serious health issues, that when they're sat down and told, you need to stop, you need to take a break, you need to settle down, because if you don't, everything that's happened is going to continue to happen, and it's going to get worse. There's huge chunks of people that when they receive that information will be able to stop. or manage or to have some kind of control. It's those people that you're sat down and told, look, if you keep drinking, you're going to die. 2 weeks later, 2 days later, 2 hours later, they're back in the pub or they're back down their off license and they're still drinking.
Is that how much of that habitual behavior do you think, from your experience of I assume you're networked with quite a number of addicts due to being inside programs or whatever, how much of that is felt like it's out of one's control? Like the words like, I'd imagine, I can't help it. It's not a decision I'm making. It's something that's kind of taken over me.
Yeah.
Is that common? Is that the?
Yes. Yeah. You'll hear it. The only experience that I've got around recovering from addiction is being in 12-step programs, and I've done various sort of counselling as well. And it's that the theme that comes up is, for me, it was waking up in the morning and it was like, I'm not drinking again. I can't drink again. And then by, sometimes it was, I'd get maybe a day or two. Sometimes it was an hour or two. And then I'm back drinking. And it's this compulsive. So what would happen is I'd get a thought. I would think, right, I know what's going to help, because, you might have the shakes, you might have, sweats, you're having DTs, and you think, I know what's going to take care of this is if I can get a small fix, it will just settle the nerves down, it will just bring me back to earth, and then I can go about my day. But the trouble is, once I would sort of take one inside me, once I put a drink inside me, or have whatever it was, a pill or a line or something, this like a physical, it's almost like an allergy kicks in, and I just want to have another one. And once I've had that one, it's just bang, and I'm through, and I'm off. And everything that's got planned for the rest of the day has disappeared.
And Elton, I think it was Eric Clapton said, because he used to, I don't know whether he still does, but he used to play New Year's Eve at the Woking Alcoholics Anonymous gig there for the AA. He said that when people used to say to him, why you can just have one, and he would say, and Mark King from Level 42 said the same thing. Actually, he said that one is one too many, and two is too much.
Yeah.
And so there's no middle ground. There's no kind of like, I'll just have one.
Yeah.
It's like it just is on. And I was dating someone briefly, relatively recently, who was in the program, and I remember the conversation of, well, I didn't realize that she was actually a recovering alcoholic, and so we went out, and she said, "Oh no, I'm not drinking tonight." And I said, "No, okay, fine, no worries." But I said, you can, if you want, we can have one. And then that's only when I realized that actually one, it's not one. You don't have one.
No.
You have all.
Yeah.
and that was kind of an eye opener for me. I genuinely didn't realize that there was no off switch.
No, it's on or off. The problem is for me is when I don't have one. And so let's say, I think when life was at its worst, I could maybe get a week where I wouldn't have a drink or any kind of substance. And from day 1 to day 7, personally, I got worse.
Right.
I never felt better, always felt worse. And if you hang around like AA meetings or any kind of recovery meetings or programs, you'll hear a lot that drugs and alcohol weren't my problem, they were my solution. Life was my problem.
Right.
So without any kind of solution, and without any alcohol or any drugs, life just got worse. And so then I'd start back up again.
Do you buy into the thought that, well, the concept, the claim, if you like, that addiction is a choice, that actually there is no such thing as being out of control? You are in control. You're choosing to be out of control. You actually are the determining factor of your choices. There's no secret hidden power that's forcing you to open a bottle of vodka. This is actually something that you are you can choose to make a better decision for yourself or not. It's not something that's some superpower that kind of like a puppeteer of your. Is that along the lines of where you think?
I'm supposed to say. I feel very uncomfortable. For example, when we talk about addiction as an illness, and people say, "Well, you wouldn't treat a cancer patient like this. You wouldn't lock up someone that's got leukemia." So I'm very it makes me uncomfortable when addiction is compared to something like cancer, because no one chooses to get cancer. No one chooses to have leukemia. I absolutely made all of those choices myself, and I was conscious of all those decisions that I made. So I accept full responsibility for everything that I did and everything that went on in my life for the last 10 years. It's very difficult to explain to somebody that when you wake up in the morning and you put me on a lie detector test, and I'm telling you that I'm not going to drink. I absolutely don't want to. But then I find myself in the supermarket, this would happen regularly. It's like, don't buy alcohol, don't buy alcohol, don't buy any wine, don't buy any booze, don't buy any beer. Just go in, just get bread, eggs, milk, all the things that you do when you go shopping. And I'd walk out and there's 12 cans of Stella, or there's 2 bottles of wine. And it's like, I've got no idea how it happened. It genuinely feels like when you sort of retrace your steps and you're in the shop and you feel your hand going for the bottle, it's like, you don't want it, 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 and you put it in. It's like, well, I've got it now, I might as well take it home.
Yeah,
it's like it does feel like it's something else is sort of guiding you, but being kind of logical and rational, I know that that's bullshit. I'm genuinely making that. Because I think once you form this habit, because it's the only thing that I know that's gonna cure me and make me feel better, because I've got nothing else going on in my life that's gonna replace it. So I just continue with the habit.
It's interesting because if there were to be a power that is forcing, or a force that is moving your hands to the shelf, if there were to be one, cognitively, it would be probably known as a choice supportive bias. And a choice supportive bias would be something that overtakes a rational thought and applies a framework that can, for instance, insert things like, well, it's only one bottle, or actually, well, I'm going to get the organic wine. Or 12 cans of Stella, at least I'm not going for 24. Or actually, I always drink wine with food, therefore, or we're at a party, at a gig. I mean, I used to smoke. Playing guitar and smoking for me were synonymous from the age of 14 to 34, I would say. So I literally felt like I couldn't play guitar and not smoke. It just kind of, they went, and in fact, I thought that the bit between the low E string and the neck is where you put the cigarette. And actually, that came from Eric Clapton, Royal Albert Hall. It came from Steve Lukather from Toto. It came from Slash. And so my view was guitar and cigarettes, and it took me ages to disassociate guitars and cigarettes. The problem I had with cigarettes wasn't the nicotine craving. It was that it was synonymous with one of my favorite pastimes.
Yeah.
And so that my head kind of, I had to
use the two together.
Even now when I play a gig, if there's someone smoking outside the gig and I'm playing a gig, I want to have a cigarette.
Yeah.
And I'm not addicted to nicotine.
Yeah.
Actually, there's an association. So the last time you and I met was in a pub. You weren't drinking.
Yeah.
I have to ask, how how awkward is that for someone who is in recovery to stand around people getting pissed?
There's two answers to that. The first is, now that I've got this now that I'm in recovery and I have a solution to life and I don't need to drink, I'm absolutely free to go anywhere I like. So long as if I've got a good reason to be there, like I can go to a pub or a restaurant or a bar, or, I do gigs as well. So I'm gigging in clubs and venues and there's always drink going on. And I'm absolutely comfortable being there. When I go out, not that I go out often, but if I'm in social situations and people are drinking, I usually hit a ceiling, and that's usually determined by how quickly people get drunk. And then you're just on a different plane, and then you just think, right, well, now it's time to go home.
Right.
And you just say your goodbyes and off you go.
Yeah. And moving back on to the how addicts are treated, I was moved by what you said at the beginning that addicts, drink and drug addicts are treated like criminals essentially.
Yeah.
But whereas other types of people aren't. Is the treatment of addicts like criminals based in part that if it's in Class A drugs, they are actually criminals.
Yeah.
But if it's drinking, they aren't criminals, but they're criminalized. Essentially, I'm trying to work out how the treatment of people comes in here, not just treatment in terms of medical treatment, but how people are dealt with. Let's open that box.
Okay.
How do you? What's your take on that? How addicts are viewed?
I think there's, first of all, if you're talking about someone that's using Class A's, I don't know the exact legal framework, but I think if you're going out and you're buying illegal substances, then you're breaking the law. So if you're caught as a recreational user with a few grams of cocaine, I don't know what first time offence. I don't know, you get a slap on the wrist, maybe some community service. Which I think is absolutely fair. That's if you're dealing small amounts of cannabis or something, you'll face whatever sanctions that you'll get. Whatever, I don't know what it is.
That's all fine. That's all fair. But then when you're an addict, I guess, do you feel that addicts are treated unfairly after they are? Let's say when they go into recovery, or what do you think there should be more support? Should there be different legislation? What is needed for the conversation to change? What should we aim towards?
It was exactly what that the video that you shared touched on, that the decriminalisation of certain substances, which I think it was Portugal, wasn't it? And they decriminalised heroin, they decriminalised crack and cocaine, I believe.
I think they've decriminalised everything.
And so what you'll see is instead of punishing people who are just habitual users, I think people need to fall into a category, so they're not just people who are going out on a Friday night getting wasted and the rest of the month is absolutely fine. People that fall into this category of, look, this is the 10th time you've been arrested this month. Clearly you've got a problem. Nothing that we're doing is helping. There should be sort of treatment centres and things that are readily available for them, rather than saying, right, okay, well, you're going into prison for 6 months, or you're doing a year's stretch, because you can pick up gear and stuff in prison just as easy as you can out here.
Yeah. So are we actually saying that there's two bits? There's the legalization argument, and then there's the how we deal with habitual users argument. And are you linking the two together in your head?
I think you have to. Yeah, I think you have to.
Do we have to legalize to treat people differently, or is it actually how we deal with criminals?
Well, I think there's a difference between legalizing something and decriminalizing it. I think you can still have the substance like heroin is illegal, but if you're caught with it, right. Maybe we're not talking of a criminal offence.
Right.
I don't know how many recreational heroin users there are. I'm sure there's probably not many.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of, rightly so, there's a lot of prejudice towards addicts from members of the public, because it's seen as, they're not working. They seem to constantly be able to get their hands on whatever it is they want to get their hands on. They'll do so through any means. And there's that, I think there's still a stigma attached to it that the people are doing it, of their own will, of their own volition, and they constantly make these choices themselves rather than it being out of their control. And people want to see justice, don't they?
Yeah. Yes, and I must admit, there's quite a lot of ground there to cover, and I just to throw one bit into the mix here. My view, anyway, of legalization and decriminalization is based on epigenetics. Actually, I know that our body structures itself based on emotion, but doesn't know the difference between the experience that creates the emotion versus an emotion created by thought.
Right.
And so our environment of experience signals our genes to turn on or off various chemical properties. In other words, we can actually think ourselves into illness and think ourselves into care. And all the genes make proteins. And proteins are responsible for the structure and function of our body. And our body begins to change into the future state depending on the thought. And if we think about the future in one way, our body believes it's living in the future moment in the present, and thereby the future exists. So here's the reality scientifically. The second time you take a drug, the expectation of the feeling of the first time is the thing that causes the feeling the second time.
Right.
So if you're at a party and someone switches out one drug with a total placebo, that to all intents and purposes tastes, smells, feels exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's the expectation it's the memory cycle that brings about the high. In kickboxing, one of my coaches, Gary Turner, taught me quite cleverly using this technique how to have 4 double espressos before walking into the ring. Of course, I didn't actually have 4 double espressos. Right. I thought I had 4 double espressos, and my feeling of energeticness was exactly the same as if I did have. So my feeling of legalization would be this. If everything was legalized, over a period of time, the healthcare services and the government could actually switch out drugs with a total blank version, which doesn't contain any harmful properties whatsoever, and no one would know the difference. And what you'd end up with is a load of drug addicts who are actually not addicted to drugs at all.
Addicted to feelings and emotions.
Yeah, and that's what we are humanly. And so the drug is actually not the thing that causes the feeling. The thought and the memory in our biophotons, stored in our biophotons, is what causes the feeling. It's not the drug. So, and we seem to spend a great deal of time addressing the chemical side and not a great deal of time addressing the thinking side. And to your point, actually, if someone's nicked after 10 times using a particular illegal substance and is thrown into prison, the thought process could only be suboptimal and less positive. It is, I'm a criminal, I'm worthless. It supports, in fact, choice supportive bias, one of the reasons why they use drugs in the first place. And of course, they're in prison where they can find drugs all over the place. So it definitely doesn't stop drug users.
No, I mean, when did Nixon declare the war on drugs? That was 70s?
Yeah, I think so.
And, you can still pick up drugs in any city in any part of the world just as easily and probably cheaper.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because in terms of decriminalizing this, do you feel that that we have the healthcare budget to, on a mass scale, provide the support for addicts?
Damn. I've got no idea.
Because
no idea.
What I'm concerned about is, especially under the remit of our Brexit situation we're in, and the extraordinary lack of investment in certain healthcare, that we aren't financially structured to provide the support that would be needed. So part of the reason why the support isn't provided like it is because we can't actually afford to provide it. And so let's assume that we couldn't restructure our finances to provide it. Is there any other way that we as a country could support addicts better?
Can you give me 5 minutes on that?
Well, I'll give you my feelings and then you can start with that. I mean, my view is that addiction is largely based on thought and the memory function on a repeat cycle. Okay. And the biases and heuristics, i.e. the frameworks of our thought processes in our heads and in our minds, is the cause of addiction, more so than the chemicals.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, so I think it can come down to education as well, just a better education and understanding of addiction and of addicts and their behaviour, and perhaps in the rehab of addicts, we could introduce new thinking patterns and new because the worst thing is addicts are just they're constantly stuck in their own heads, and it's using the same old thinking to try and solve the same old problem, and it's just you just end up in this horrible cycle.
Yes,
there needs to be a break in that. And it can come around. Religious conversion has huge success in the rehabilitation of addicts. I think probably more so than anything else.
Yeah. I found that
it's all about this kind of a psychic change, a new way of thinking. Stop looking inwards, start looking outwards.
Yeah.
Realizing actually that if you talk about this country, even the most down and out addicts would probably have their position swapped for somebody living in squalor in Africa. They'd say, someone would put their hand up, say, I'll take that.
Yeah.
They've still got access to clean water. You can find shelter, you can find warmth, you can even steal food if you need to, compared to what some people are living in.
Yeah. Do you I mean, part of the reason why ThinkUp exists is because it's essentially thought school. It's a mind gym. I'm amazed by how much time we spend working on our bodies and working on our careers and working on our relationships and working on all these other things, and we don't spend a lot of time working on our thinking. And I reckon that one of the ways of addressing addiction is by addressing how we think in a very rigorous way of looking at the thought processes and actually working out the patterns and then working out the unlock codes to those patterns. In fact, I'm going to release a book next year that actually goes through exactly how that pattern recognition and undoing that could work. And so I wanted to ask about the 12-step program in that, because from my understanding in the 12-step program, there's actually that's kind of a pattern break process in itself. There's the kind of the taking the accountability part, but also there's a mention of God in that as well. There's a kind of
it's I mean, it's not a religious program, but the ultimate aim of the Alcoholics Anonymous book is to get people from where they are to a connection with a God of their understanding.
Okay.
Being it a religious or not. I mean, I'm not religious at all. I regard myself as an atheist, but then, I'm allowed to think of, I can choose my own conception of what God is.
So, Jimmy Hendrix, obviously.
Yeah. It can't be based in any kind of human power, because so it's got to be, slightly more elevated. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was all science-based and physics-based, universe creation and that kind of thing, which has served me very, very well for almost 4 years. But yeah, the thinking pattern behind it is, if we as addicts admit that we've got no power or no control over whatever it is that we're addicted to, the obvious solution is we need some kind of power, to enable us to get over it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't stop for myself. I couldn't stop for my children. I couldn't stop for my wife. I couldn't stop for friends, for family, my mum and dad, brothers and sisters. Everybody was sort of speaking to me in these sort of very concerned tones, and it was always brushed off and no, I'll be fine. And then 2 weeks later, it's just chaos. So it was a difficult one for me, just seeing that word God was very difficult, but it was either get to grips with that or go back out there.
Yeah.
So
do you feel, I mean, I know some people who've been in the AA program for 35, 40 years, and why would they still go to that if they're recovered? Because do you buy into this thing that you are never actually recovered, you're always an alcoholic? Do you buy into that?
When I first started, the idea was for me to get 18 months clean and sober, and then I can break off and leave, and hopefully I have everything kind of in place and I can just leave. I got to 18 months and I was still terrified. I guess it depends on how bad your drinking and using was. I've spoken to people who are sort of 10 years in, and see, I do Cocaine Anonymous, which is usually a younger crowd, and you won't usually find people with 30 years sobriety in there. They'll usually make some kind of transition. Either they'll go off to do AA, or they'll just disappear. But it's very rare to find somebody with that amount of clean time.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think maybe they would go to AA. That's the only. I know. I haven't got 30 years, and I don't. and I'm not in AA. So
one of the things that I've been increasingly aware of is that if you look at the damage to health of all drugs, including alcohol, if you look at the damage to health, not just your own health, but damage to people around you and damage to everything else like that, alcohol spanks all of it.
Yeah.
Triumphs.
Yeah.
In terms of damage.
Yeah.
In terms of health damage, the amount of deaths, the amount of, it's just, there's no competitor. It just beats everything, right? But it's legal.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just address that point here? What's your view on that?
I think if alcohol had been invented around, the mid 19th century, mid 20th century, there's no way it would have been legalized. No way. I think just because it's centuries old. I don't think there's any way of prizing it from people's hands. I think it's just there, and it's going to have to be managed, and it's going to have to be dealt with.
Because there's something that's much older than that, and that is all types of plants.
Yeah.
And so before alcohol, people were able to take a mushroom out of the ground, or they were able to smoke a leaf.
Yeah.
So thousands and thousands and thousands of years earlier, there's what comes out of the ground.
Yeah.
And then the last 40 years, 50 years, that stuff's been vilified. And so so we're at a situation where making alcohol prohibited, so going back to prohibition days, making a kind of a new temperance movement type of, so making alcohol restricted is probably less practical, but it would seem that many places outside of Portugal or the Netherlands are finding legalization a massive stumbling block. Is there any reason why that? Do you feel that that's the case? Why are we not looking at legalization through a slightly less short-sighted lens of, oh, we can't legalize that? You know, whatever next? We'll have drug addicts walking around without being arrested. It's like, okay, well, let's zoom out here and actually look at humanity's health.
Yeah,
and how to address the problem. Why would we not see things like that?
I don't know. I think maybe it's stuffy old men in suits in Westminster who would rather, I don't know, they sound quite Orwellian, would rather keep the boot on the face of the everyday man. I don't know. It's I think that is on the way. I think that the decriminal. I mean, you can, like, CBD oil is now fairly readily available today, and it wasn't last year or 2 years ago.
In Holland and Barrett, it's in boot.
Yeah. Are we going to see a time when you can pick up a NHS prescribed little vial of cocaine? Maybe, I don't know. I think that could do more good than have people buying rat poison laced heroin off the streets.
And I think that what would do more good is to address how thought patterns work.
Yeah.
And I'm so heavily biased towards that due to science. That if we could properly look at thinking, and that power that gets you into the supermarket and puts the bottle into the basket without knowing, that power is a bias.
Yeah.
There's a heuristic and a bias inside your head. That is the power.
Yeah.
And addressing those powers and how they work is so critical. And this leads me to kind of like last kind of parts of the questioning I'm fascinated to see your opinion on, is you managed to keep your relationship through this period, right? You managed to keep your were you married during?
Yes. Yeah, I was married 2013. I was with Marlo since 2009, and we're still together now. And in the bedroom right now.
And so did she help you with your mindset during your recovery, or did she help you think differently, or did you have to basically construct the new thoughts yourself?
When I entered recovery, this is something I actually wanted to touch on earlier. One of the first things that we give to newcomers as kind of a new thinking tool is every morning we want you to write down 10 things that you're grateful for. And it could be anything. Just think of 10 things, and not just like, house, car, kid, really try and expand. I'm grateful that, I'm breathing today. I'm grateful that I'm, there's some food in the cupboard. I've got hot and cold water, and it just helps you break that old thinking habit in the morning of, oh God, it's another day. God, I don't want to use. God, I don't want to drink. And or if, depending on what meeting you go to, some people might tell you, when you get up, make your bed in the morning, just to get you out of that old habit into new ways of thinking. But yeah, absolutely, she was very supportive and very encouraging of of getting to meetings and doing recovery, and continues to do so. So it's.
Did your view of her change from being the sober, or from being the fucked up version of yourself to the sober version of yourself? Did your opinion of her change? Like, did you have to relearn who she was?
Oh Christ, I'm still doing that now. Yeah. She'll do something even today, and she'll say, and she looks at me and says, "Don't even pretend like you know who I am." So, but going from the alcoholic to the recovered me, I had a lot of and still do a lot of respect for someone that sticks by somebody who goes through that. I'm very thankful she did, because fuck knows where I'd be without her.
I think you could probably imagine where you'd be, and you'd be at the back of some fucking gutter, something sticking out of your nose or out of your arm or something.
Yes, but yeah, it was hugely supportive, and my children as well. It was, I had to sort of not only to relearn who they were, I relearned who I was as well, and that was a huge part of this program.
Well, I've watched your progress through this. I'm just tremendously proud of you, mate, and the strength and determination and focus that you've done is evidence to me that almost anything is possible that you set your mind to. I just think that's, and also sharing it so publicly.
I know that there's, from my own experience, I know that there are people out there who are exactly where I was, but have absolutely no option or way to get out. So if it can come across as a bit of an ego boost, and it is to a certain extent, when I share my recovery date, or if I hit a certain milestone, but it is there because I know that there are people. I've had people reach out to me on Facebook like, "Mate, how did you? I'm doing this. I can't stop doing it." And and if one person can come in and get some kind of help or recovery, or even just untie a few knots, then that's why I do it.
And to that point, actually, and in closing, if there's someone watching this, because I share this across all channels, and I was saying to you before we started recording that I'm amazed that the amount of viewing figures of these little videos is ridiculously high, bearing in mind there's very few people who get involved in the conversation, which tells me that actually a lot of people want the information. It's just they don't necessarily want to share their view. But if there was someone watching this across any of the channels that it's shared on, who resonates strongly with what you're saying and actually thinks, you know what, I'm that person. I've actually got that behavioral pattern. What is the first thing? And I'm avoiding saying everyone contact him. What is the first? What do they do first? What's the first thing in asking for help, or what do they do?
I would go to a GP.
Okay.
First point of call is a GP. Depending on what it is you're taking, what it is that you're using, you might need hospital treatment. So if you're a violent alcoholic, before we can even begin to think about recovery, you need to be detoxed. They've got a wealth of information and medical history and medical background regarding things like addiction, and it would be foolish not to go there first. If there's a specific thing that you've got a problem with, I've read somewhere there's like 800 anonymous groups: Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Overeating Anonymous, whatever it is. You can Google it and you can find that. I mean, especially in London, there's either a CA meeting, a Cocaine Anonymous meeting, within about a 3-mile radius from my house every day.
Wow.
Which is incredible. And it also tells you the scope of the problem.
Well, if 1 in 3 people are addicted to something, then yeah. About 20 million people in the United Kingdom addicted to something.
So go to a GP. That's the first port of call, and they can usually guide you to maybe counselling, CBT, which 12-step program is good it's saved thousands and thousands of lives, but it's not for everybody. You might be able to find some kind of recovery without needing to do that. For a lot of people, it's kind of last port of call.
Right.
The only reason that I went there rather than over anything else is just I had a friend that owns a restaurant at the top of the road, and he's in there, and he'd seen me in there drinking. I used to play there in his restaurant, and he would drop sort of little tiny subtle hints, plant little seeds, and then when I broke, it was the first person I went to. So,
right.
Yeah, there's hundreds of 12-step programs for people with problems. So, but I'd say GP would be should be first point of call.
Okay.
Try and get an idea of the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, because as you say, there may be other health consequences that you don't necessarily know yourself.
Yeah, I mean, there's usually it's very rare to find someone come into a 12-step program that doesn't need something else, some kind of cognitive behavioural therapy or counselling, and that falls well outside the remit of a 12-step program.
Yeah. Good.
So yeah.
Good. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that should have been said?
No, I think we've covered a lot in 52 minutes.
Yeah.
That's
epic.
I think there's a lot, and there's and I think if this is the platform from which other conversations springboard from, then it's a good place to start. Yeah, I'm quite a strong advocate for things like the decriminalisation of heroin and crack and cocaine, but it needs to be done in a way that you don't pop to the supermarket and pick it up with eggs and milk and you've got a little vial of something. Yeah,
I love the fact that you said that decriminalisation is different from legalisation.
Yeah,
that's a huge point. Point. Okay, good. Well, maybe this is the first of other conversations. I'd like to get Petra involved and some other people who we know. So maybe this is conversation number 1 on this topic.
Yeah.
But let's see any feedback, or I just hope that someone listening to this is triggered in a positive way and goes, well, actually that's me. Now's the time to look at this.
And that's actually that's one of the hardest things to do, is to actually admit that what you're doing is a problem. Because especially as addicts, you'll see, especially with something like alcohol, you'll see hundreds of people drinking with impunity, and you think, well, they're doing it, I should be able to do it. And it's that break from realizing that you're different to them.
To be honest with you, it's one of the reasons why I love juice cleanses. I love actually the feeling of there's the health feeling is one thing, but there's also the mental feeling of just like, actually everything is a choice. What I eat, what I drink, I can actually stop all of it.
And that's something I need to address as well, because I can't stop eating sweets. So it manifests itself in other ways, and other little corners it will crop up.
Yeah, I would thoroughly recommend. I mean, I use Plenish Cleanse. Press is also good as well, but Plenish Cleanse is probably the most hardcore.
Right.
And I've got an affiliate code if anyone wants it, get 10 quid off their order. But the Plenish Cleanse, I do the 5-day detox. It's quite expensive, but you lose 3 or 4 kilos in weight. You feel like you've just been born. Your skin looks like it's glowing. You sleep like the dead. And then at the end, I do a cleanse every 3 months. But at the end of the cleanse, all of the food choices become really conscious. So I stopped having toast about a year ago in the morning. At the end of the cleanse, I now have spinach, apple, banana, blueberry, strawberry as a juice, a smoothie thing. And if I ever have solid food in the morning now, I feel like crap. So that changed. Lunchtimes, it turns out that I have probably the biggest meal of the day, and it tends to be salad based with some other stuff. And then dinner, I probably skip 2 in 5 dinners.
Okay.
This doesn't seem to, unless I've had a big workout. But all of all of this has come from juicing. Because as soon as you come off juice, you realise that everything you finish juicing and then you have a Cornish pasty, you feel like shit. It's your body going, this doesn't serve you at all. So
yeah, I think that's the next next realm I need to go into is diet, nutrition, and more exercise. And as I approach 40, it's becoming more apparent that I can't do the things I was doing when I was 20.
Yeah, I know that, mate. And by the way, the sweets thing, if you did do a juice cleanse, you'd have one sweet afterwards and you would taste it for the poison that it is.
Yeah.
I can assure you of that.
All right, well, maybe I'll give it a go.
If you start with a 3-day cleanse or a 2-day cleanse, that's cool. 5-day cleanse it's like, you will detox. Anyone watching this, by the way, after the second day of a cleanse, it's the same as going cold turkey off any form of drug, because your body is going, where's the caffeine? Where's the refined sugar? Your digestion just goes, you end up shitting green fluid after 3 days. It's just it's a weird thing, but it changes your life, man.
Yeah.
It changes your life.
Okay. Well, I'm all about life-changing decisions.
You're good at it. You're world class at that, mate. Okay, thanks for joining us, mate. And I hope that someone watching this has affected you positively. And Tim, mate, you're a fucking star. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Cheers, mate.
Cool.